Good day, friends. In the last video, I went through the process of swatching. This week, I'm forging ahead and knitting on the sweater. My aim is to get the majority of the body in place so we can work on the arms and banding. We'll see what kind of time we have available. I have 5 balls of wool that share the same dye lot, so I cast on using one of those. I'm hoping I won't need to dip into the other 3 balls of non-similar dye lot, but if I do, being able to work them in as alternating rounds on the sleeves would be useful. It would help blend in the slightly different color tone. Okay, well I'm about a third of the way through the instructions for the upper back, and I've just hit my very first snag. It appears that for the upper back, they want me to repeat this stockinette for about, well, I'm not quite sure, because for the largest size it's saying 21 rows, but for the second largest size it's saying 24 rows, and I can't see the largest size having less length than the second largest size. So I've had to send off a email or Ravelry message to the designer of the pattern, Andi Satterlund, and hopefully she will be getting back to me tomorrow with more information, because I just kind of blazed through this first part of the pattern really quickly, and I have a feeling that I'd probably be finished the upper back fairly quickly if not for this little snag. So I guess we will see what happens once I get a reply.
One eternity later.
I reached out to Andi Satterlund regarding the pattern directions, and she's assured me that the instructions are correct. On the surface, it looks like we're making the back shorter, but she's building that extra length into the next step, which is starting the back curve of the armhole. Very smart indeed, and accounts for any width at the back, so there's less pulling at the back arm side. I'm learning a lot about construction as we go along, as well as current knitting methods. I have vague memories of watching my grandmother piece together complicated sweaters, and it was very much like watching my mum sew a dress. Each piece was knit separately, measured against the body, and then sewed together along the seam lines. Looking at the pictures in Geraldine Warner's Vintage Design Workshop, you can see evidence of at least some of that technique. It's no coincidence that my grandmother preferred knitting her sweaters in the round, pullovers especially. Did I read the little foreword at the beginning of the pattern outlining the method used? As a person who worked in tech for almost 20 years, well, everyone knows you don't read the documentation until you have to, right? The sweater, as written, is separated into parts that I originally thought might be pieced together afterwards. Au contraire, friends, instead of casting on for the upper right front separately to be seamed to the upper back, you actually pick up stitches from the cast-on edge. This gives a cleaner join that's less obvious. The only reason it's recognizable is due to the extra thickness from knitting over the cast-on edge on the wrong side, which shows through as a less detectable seam ridge. So what's going to happen is that we'll knit the upper portions of the sweater, upper back, upper left and right fronts, all as one large piece. This will drape over the shoulders nicely, leaving live and held stitches that can just be knit as one long row. There are instructions to place the stitches at the bottom of each section on hold, so I'm using some of my sock knitting circulars as stitch holders. When the time comes, I'll just transfer all those stitches onto my 1 size 8 circular and knit as if they were all one piece. Which they will be. No side seam, vague shoulder seams, and hopefully nice shaping. Bearing that in mind, we won't be knitting the sleeves separately and setting them in. Instead, we'll pick up around the edge of the arm size somehow and do some shaping before working on the sleeve. This may be a little awkward to maneuver by the time we're done with the main torso pieces. baked bread. This is a recipe that went around a friend's office until it wound up at our home. Of course, he's very technically inclined and works for a rather large networking company, so everything was in grams. Because I learned to bake from my mom and grandmother, I prefer cups and tablespoons and such. So I made him rewrite the recipe. The final numbers are the same as one that he found on the Epicurious website, so if you're interested in trying your hand at this, I'll link it in the description down below. Personally, I like my fresh baked bread with a little bit of butter and honey. It's a tasty treat to share with the husbeast. It took a while, but we're coming up on the end of the first ball of yarn. Gonna get ready to start casting on the second anytime now. Oh, I wasn't kidding about things being awkward. Every row that I have to knit back and forth is an adventure. Do I just turn the needles around so there's a temporary twist in the fabric, then hope I turn it back around in the same direction to untwist? Or more likely, do I just keep picking up the whole sweater as it is and hear the points of the sock needles I'm using as stitch holders drag on the desk? I guess it's a little bit of column A and a whole lot of column B as I get down to the point where I can transfer everything onto one needle and make this thing look more like a sweater and less like a Lovecraftian nightmare. Oh, what's this? We're transferring stitches? Yay! Now, the advantage that sewing has over knitting is that you can generally try it on as you go to check the fit and drape. I'm sure that if I had another size 8 needle, I could do this with the sweater, but as it stands, all my stitches are spread out over one 32-inch cable. My plan at this point is to try on the sweater after the bottom band is cast off. At that point, we'll know if I'll be ripping back and re-knitting.
Ah, yeah, there's that flap. Oh, and such a proud little dance, too. No! You can't stop the signal.
That's pretty much what I was thinking.
And this is where my days start to run together, and I posted notice on the YouTube channel's discussion tab and the Stringchronicity forum on Ravelry that this video would be delayed. I'm recording this after the fact, so I'm looking at the past week in hindsight. It's a lot easier that way. The days have blended together, as have the nights, so I'm still trying to make sense of it all. On May 13th, my father-in-law passed away after a long fight with cancer. The whole family was present. We'd spent the week before caring for both him and my mother-in-law, who had broken her ankle. It was a bright, sunny day, and the tulips in the yard were starting to bloom. It seems odd to say that it was a perfect afternoon, but it was. It was nice to step out of the house and into the warmth of the sunshine. My sweater project was put aside temporarily, and even the very portable sock project that I carried along to the house each night was rarely touched. I did appreciate having my helpful sheep along for the ride, though, particularly those times when I felt able to do just a bit more than stare blankly at Instagram. The one phrase that kept repeating over the past week was, "It is what it is." I went hunting in my craft bins and came up with some embroidery floss and some Aida cloth with a partial design that was easily ripped back. I'm in the process of memorializing that phrase surrounded by a floral design I found on the DMC website. I'm back to working on the sweater, and we're heading down to the waist, decreasing as we go. The shaping looks somewhat like a subtle dart under each armhole. It's an interesting design, but it's 5 repeats of a 4-row pattern, and each purl row seems to take an eternity. Maybe 2. So that's where I'm going to leave this week's vlog. Next week we'll see if I've managed to get back on track with the Crumb sweater, or if I've successfully sidetracked myself into completing all the cross-stitch projects I've had on hold since I took up knitting somewhere in 2005. Stay tuned, friends.